This Chicago Bears victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers was all about the Bears making up for some of their own mistakes in the game and the backups stepping up for the injured starters.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network. And on the show today, I want to go back through this Bears win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now we've had time to digest it, to go back through and watch the All-22 film and kind of get a better sense of not just what happened, but like why and how the Bears were able to win this game. We'll start with Caleb Williams' performance that still I don't think was particularly great. I think the box score is a little bit deceiving there, but I think going back through, I can kind of understand a little bit better, and I think we have a more clear picture of exactly kind of what was happening and why, and sort of what it means for his development moving forward, where I think the inaccuracy is still a little bit worse than we want it to be, but it's certainly not something to panic about yet either. We'll check in on the running game as well before we turn our attention to the Bears' defense and what was working and not working against Mason Rudolph and company. Ultimately, how I think the Steelers' game plan played into what the Bears wanted to do defensively a little bit better than some other matchups the Chicago Bears have been in. And then we'll also check in on some of the starters who had to step up into new roles. You know, Ozzie Trapillo at left tackle, even right guard Luke Newman getting some time in there, but the injured linebackers, and just some of the new faces in Chicago. We'll check in on how they performed in this game in particular. But let's start with the offense, because Caleb Williams had kind of a hard to pin down type of game, because you might glance at the box scores and see 3 touchdowns, 239 yards, 19 of 35 passing is nothing to write home about, but a 104 passer rating is a good passer rating, and I do think he was not bad by any means in this game, but there were still too many missed throws that you expect Caleb Williams to be able to hit. And I think that's part of where you saw this team not even fall behind in this game, but it's how you saw the Steelers start to get back into this game and even take a lead there in the first half. It's like early on, especially that second drive, offense is clicking a little bit more, but then Caleb misses a few throws and then fumbles in the end zone and gives up the touchdown. And then, the Steelers take a lead there, and then they get the lead again, right before the first half. Like, I think the offense kind of was getting in its own way at times more often than it was like the Steelers defense making some, horrific or tremendous type of play for them, to be really stopping the Bears. And it just felt like there were still too many of those throws that were just a quarterback missing a receiver by being inaccurate, not by making a bad decision, and not even necessarily like the defense flushes him out of the pocket and then he misses a tough throw. Like he missed a number of throws from a pretty relatively clean pocket. And as I was kind of going through them, it looked more so they were coming on, in breaking routes or horizontal routes, maybe is the better way to put it, that when he was working vertically up the seam, he was doing just fine. You look at like the next gen passing chart of where his completions and stuff were, like those vertical balls, he hit like 3 different post routes up the seam. He hit Colston Loveland up the seam a number of times, DJ Moore on a 4 verticals route up the seam. Like those plays were working a lot better, especially to the right side there. But a lot of the deeper incompletions were on like deep dig routes, deep in routes where, receiver runs about 20 yards and then cuts in. He overthrew a couple of those. He was behind on one of those as well. And I think like those are the areas that he's still just trying to sort of fine tune and master. Those are some of the more difficult throws to make when you're trying to layer it in between, in front of a deep safety, but behind an underneath linebacker. And so you have to put enough zip on it so that an underneath linebacker doesn't have a chance to go up and get it, and the safety doesn't have enough time to come down and stop it. But you can't put so much gas on it that it comes out too flat or goes too hard and too high, and we kind of seen him have issues with both of those. Like when you look at Caleb Williams' incompletions in this game, he was incomplete on 16 of his passes were incomplete. 4 of those were throwaways. Okay, so where he's intentionally not aiming for a receiver but just getting rid of it. One of them was a spike. So there's 5 of those incompletions that are just not even really aimed passes. And then you've got a drop from Rome Odunze on one of those deep in routes that he actually hit was dropped by Rome Odunze. It's another, again, feels a little bit more self-inflicted of a wound there. Not on Caleb, but just on a receiver not making the play. You had 2 throws to Odunze at the sideline. One where the defender punches the ball out as he's going out of bounds, so that not caught, but a good pass from Caleb. The other one where Odunze can't get 2 feet in bounds. Again, not like a bad throw from Caleb Williams. And you can start to narrow this down where you still have, I think you had a couple of overthrows, a couple of throws that were behind the receivers, and those all tended to be a little bit more downfield. There was one on the shallow cross to Luther Burden, but for the most part, I think there were 6 or 7 truly inaccurate throws. And to me, that's 1 or 2 or 3 more than I'd like to see. I mean, I think any given quarterback is going to have, 3 to 5 inaccurate throws in a game. You'd like that number to be closer to 0 than 5, but that feels like kind of the quote unquote acceptable range. I don't know. The exact number is not super important there, but 7 feels like a little bit too many more than you'd like. And I think that hurts them in some situations. And then the running game struggling then also compounds that when they can't really get the ground game going. So they're in these longer down and distance situations. And then either Caleb's missing or Rome can't hang on to it, or there's an illegal formation penalty, or there's a holding penalty, right? And it's all these sort of little things that then the Bears were able to overcome offensively down the stretch by Caleb stepping up and hitting some of those open receivers up the seam, by Ben Johnson being able to scheme Luther Burden in a wide receiver reverse that goes for 15 yards in their longest run of the game, right? Hitting those slant routes over the middle. He was able to hit those sort of quick hitting passes and some more of those vertical passes that then made up for when either he was missing or receivers weren't making plays or there were penalties that were causing a lot of the issues. And speaking of the running game real quickly here, I was trying to get a sense of what's the story here with Monangai getting 12 carries, Swift getting 8, and even more specifically than that, Swift's getting less than 2 yards per carry on those 8, and Monangai gets himself up to 4 yards per carry. He was getting more opportunities and running better. I want to shout out one of the commenters here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. Did a great job. Brought up a point that I hadn't considered there of the fumble where DeAndre Swift fumbles on, it wasn't the third drive of the game, but it was the drive after Caleb Williams had fumble. And that the comment was from Bear Desert LLC 6561 on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. Said, I suspect Swift's early game fumble had something to do with his reduced workload, and that if he had to bet, that Monangai and Swift will be back to their usual split on Friday against the Eagles. That's the best explanation I've heard yet. I don't think anyone's confirmed that, but that would make sense that Swift has that fumble and they say, all right, we're going to give Monangai more carries for a little while just to sort of quote unquote punish Swift for a bit, and that's how Monangai ends up having a bigger role than Swift over the course of the game. And I'm satisfied with that explanation for the snaps and the playing time. I still don't have a good explanation for why one had a lot more success than the other, because you go back through, they were running a very similar run concepts and splits for them. They were running, the same kind of outside zone runs for the most part, and then they'd mix in some of the other runs. And for some reason, Monangai was having more success on they'd call the same play for both running backs, and Monangai was getting more yards. I think Monangai was getting better blocking on some of those plays, and I don't think it was obviously the offensive line isn't intentionally blocking better for one back than the other. I just think some of it's the normal ebbs and flows of a Pittsburgh Steelers front seven that's pretty good, and they're going to stop you on some running plays, especially when you've got maybe 2 backups in the game for a little while there in Ozzie Trapillo at left tackle and Luke Newman at right guard. That run blocking can become a little bit more of a challenge. I just think there's some flows of the game there where the Steelers defense can key in on the run a little bit and make DeAndre Swift's life a little bit more difficult at times than Monangai's was. But I'm still want to keep an eye on that on Friday against the Eagles to see how that split happens in terms of playing time and carries, but also production from the two of them, and see if is Monangai just running better, because that could be, sometimes it can be as simple as like, hey, Swift's been banged up with this hip injury, and Monangai's a little healthier, a little more juice right now, and can run a little bit harder or more physical in a game and pick up some extra yards that maybe Swift wasn't, but that's not quite satisfying enough for me either. We will check in closer on Ozzie Trapillo's performance, a little bit of Luke Newman, and some of the other newcomers for the Bears coming up on the podcast. But first, I want to take a closer look at this defense and what they were doing against Mason Rudolph to try and hold his side of the ball down. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, we're loving the NFL season so far, but now the NBA season is back, and there's no better place to get in on the basketball action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Because even if you miss the opening tip-off of the game, or once it gets rolling, you just want to ride that hot hand, someone's shooting well, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine those live in-game bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It's just a great way to keep every game exciting, especially when your team is the one that's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. This Bears defense we talked yesterday about being, I think, much more the star of the game than the offense. They held the Steelers really to 21 because 7 of those Steelers points came on a strip sack in the end zone that Caleb Williams fumbled, and the defense had a much more difficult situation to deal with all 3 linebackers out, and for a while there, all 3 cornerbacks, all 3 of your ideal healthy starting cornerbacks out. Plus, Dio Dengbo's on injured reserve on the defensive line, and it was an insurmountable type of situation that they found a way to play well. But I do think, especially going back through and rewatching it, a big factor, and not to take away from the defensive and the newcomers playing well, because we'll talk about the newcomers and what they were able to do in a little bit here, but it was a big factor. The Steelers' game plan played well into what the Bears needed. That we knew coming in, the Steelers like to throw quick and throw short. And we wondered if Mason Rudolph would maybe take some more deep shots than Aaron Rodgers had been willing to do. It's something we had seen Rudolph have some more willingness to, but he took a couple and couldn't really connect on them. One had a interception on it from Deshaun Wright. One drew pass interference penalty from Nick McLeod. So there was some success, but really they kept throwing short and throwing quick over and over again. And I get why when you've got speed with, DK Metcalf's big and fast, and then Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson both have some speed, and then they got big tight ends who can run over guys. I understand from a Steelers perspective why they go to that. Plus, their quarterbacks haven't been super accurate on the deep throws, and their offensive line hasn't been stellar. It's been fine, but not amazing, giving them a ton of time to let those deeper throws develop. But I do think that helped the Chicago Bears tremendously when you're not having to ask, Deshaun Wright played really well, but we've seen times when he struggled this season as well. But you're not having to ask Nick McLeod to continuously run with DK Metcalf one-on-one down the sideline. DK Metcalf's average depth of target in this game was 6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. When the ball was getting thrown his way, on average, he was standing 6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage when the ball came there. That absolutely made the Chicago Bears defensive job easier. Again, doesn't mean it wasn't impressive still, but the Steelers weren't going out of their way to attack the Bears defense in the ways that would be most troublesome. I get, you got 3 backup linebackers in there, throw it short and make them tackle you, but the Bears did tackle you. And that's part of the thing is when guys like DeMarco Jackson and Eamon Adbag-Bamiga have been playing a ton of special teams, the one thing they've gotten a lot of practice doing is tackling. They don't have as much practice covering a tight end up the seam deep over the middle, right? They don't have as much practice trying to sprint out to the edge. But if you're going to throw the checkdowns over the middle all the time, like we saw Mason Rudolph do over and over in that game, and you look at his passing chart, it's all under 10 yards in between the numbers. It essentially becomes kind of like special teams tackles. It's just open field tackling for Jamarco Jackson and Amnag and Ruben Hippolyte before he got hurt. And like, it's not to say that it wasn't still impressive for them to play as well as they did, but like it played into their strengths a little bit more. And I think that was favorable for Chicago in a way that maybe other matchups could have exposed some of the defensive weaknesses a little bit more. Like, for example, we know the Bears pass rush has struggled mightily throughout the season. Montez Sweat sacks Mason Rudolph twice in this game and absolutely had a strong game from a pass rushing standpoint here. But Mason Rudolph was not under pressure all that often. Like when he did hold onto the ball, the Bears were getting pressure on him, but for the most part, he was throwing it quickly, intentionally, as to not give the offensive line a lot of time to have to hold up and block. And like in some ways, from a Chicago Bears defensive perspective, that's also favorable. Like if your pass rush is bad, and so you'd rather the quarterback get rid of it quickly because when he is holding onto it, then there's more time for your receivers to get open downfield, especially if your pass rush isn't getting home. So like him getting rid of it quickly is essentially the same as the pass rush, not being able to get home. He just isn't able to throw it as deep or as far. The players aren't able to develop as much, so he has to throw it short. Like the Bears didn't blitz him a ton because he was throwing it before the blitz would be able to get home. I think they blitzed him 8 times out of 35 plays, and 0 of those blitzes actually generated pressure. We didn't see Dennis Allen go to the blitz even a ton until late in the game, and I think the blitzes did prompt him to throw it even faster because he sees, pass rusher's coming, I got to get rid of it, I got to throw it now. So I think in some ways, like it hurried him, not physically, but maybe mentally. You didn't see a blitz never got to the point where they moved Mason Rudolph off his spot per se. But I think the blitz does get in his head a little bit in terms of like, I don't know where these pass rushers are coming from. I'm not sure what coverage they're playing because here comes Jaquan Brisker. And so who's going to be covering where and what coverage? You know what I mean? I think it was effective for non-pass rush reasons. The blitz was. He was 5 of 8 for 41 yards on those blitz plays. But I think there wasn't much pass rush in general. And some of that was scheme from the offense that made it so your pass rush didn't matter as much. And that feels like it plays a little bit into the Bears' hands there. I mean, I still would have liked to see pass rushers not named Montez Sweat have a bigger impact. I mean, I think Austin Booker got one quarterback hit in there. I think Grady Jarrett got a quarterback hit, and Jarrett had a pass batted at the line of scrimmage. Like he was still able to make some impacts, but like there wasn't much else consistently generating much pressure and making Mason Rudolph uncomfortable. And that's fine in a game like this where he's just check down Charlie and just kind of throwing short. But like, you wonder against other teams how well that same strategy would work. But the good news is, like, in theory, you're not going to be missing all 3 linebackers and all 3 cornerbacks next week against the Philadelphia Eagles, or really for any other game this season. Like such a fluky, abysmal injury situation against a team that happened to match up well for your defense to be able to withstand those injuries. In terms of the running game, I think the Steelers' rushing stats got largely inflated by the 55-yard run by Kenneth Gainwell on the sort of the fake QB, the fake tush-push play that the CBS was coming back late from the commercial break, so we kind of missed it, but ran 55 yards. Outside of that, the Bears defended the run pretty well. I thought they were better at flowing sideline to sideline with the sort of outside zone type of runs that I think the Bears defense is used to practicing against, and so I think they were better flowing with that. But then when the Steelers would go like gap scheme, they'd run power and pull a guard, or they'd run counter and pull a tight end, or even just like duo north-south. I think they were a little bit more physical at the line of scrimmage than what the Bears were able to do up front. But I think from an athleticism standpoint, the Bears flowed well and kind of stayed in front of some of those outside zone runs. So ultimately, like, run defense was good enough. Take away the trick play, the run defense was totally fine. Defense did well. Mason Rudolph maybe, I don't want to say didn't make it easy on them, because you have the injuries. It's never going to be easy with those injuries, but like played into their hands well too. And I think that's how you got a better defensive performance than maybe any of us were expecting given the situation. And you got to give some credit to the guys that were thrown out there, thrown into the fire, stepped up making their first starts, or some guys had to come off the bench with additional injuries in the game as it got rolling along. And generally, the group played pretty well. We'll take a look at how the backup offensive lineman did in there, and some of these backup linebackers getting some extended playing time. Next on Locked On Bears.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
The Bears put a number of unexpected players into pivotal positions and situations in this game that could have gone so much worse. And maybe matchups helped in some cases, but even in a favorable matchup, you still got to be able to take advantage. And if you had asked me before the game, hey, how's it going to go for Ozzie Trapillo and Luke Newman in on this offensive line against the Steelers front seven, I'd have been pretty darn worried about that derailing a lot of what the Bears want to do on offense. And if you had asked me before the game, how, even Ruben Hippolyte gets hurt, and so it's DeMarco Jackson and Eamon Onbogmamiga against the Steelers offense that, yes, does throw short, but you still have to step up and tackle, DK Metcalf, who's, 6'4" and 200, and he's probably not listed even as heavy as he actually is right now, but he's listed at 6'3", 230, or try and catch Calvin Austin at 5'8", 162, who's one of the fastest players on the field, or try and tackle a 311-pound tight end in Darnell Washington. These were not easy matchups. And with maybe a couple exceptions in there, the Bears' backups that were thrust into the lineup played really well. I thought Ozzie Trapillo in particular had a lot to like in this game, blocking almost exclusively against Nick Herbig, who, to be fair, is not the Steelers' preferred starting outside linebacker. Alex Highsmith would normally be that guy that they would prefer there. But Nick Herbig leads the Steelers in sacks, or did entering this game, leads them in pressure, leads them in pass rush. He has been the better pass rusher. It's weird to say, but he's been the more productive pass rusher than TJ Watt this season. Watt faces a lot more double teams and slide protections, and there's reasons to contribute to that. It's not to say Watt is still the much better player, of course, but it's not as though the guy on the other side had been doing nothing this season. But he did close to nothing against Ozzie Trapillo. You got to hurry in there. I don't want to say Ozzie completely shut him down, but generally speaking, the rookie did a really nice job staying in front of him. Sure, the Bears gave him some help. Running backs would release to that side and kind of chip and slow him down off the edge a little bit. Joe Tooney was sliding left to help Trapillo a little bit, but they were doing that for Theo Benedict too. It's not like it was above and beyond some crazy special treatment for Trapillo. And he did really well. He was consistently keeping Herbig at bay and not letting him go anywhere. A couple times he goes up and around the top of the pocket, but that's okay as a left tackle. You push him up and around, and it's an easy step up for Caleb, and he's not even really under pressure because Caleb does his drop, and then he's hitching anyway, so his hitch just kind of takes him back up into the pocket. It's that's what you want from your left tackle in pass protection. And even in the 2-minute drills, in the first half and then down the stretch in the game, they were giving him less help, and it was a lot of one-on-ones with Herbig, and still blocked him really well and neutralized some of that pass rush from the left side of the offensive line. I was impressed. I was thoroughly impressed by Trapillo in that regard. I did think he was a lot better working backwards in pass protection than pushing forward in the running game. I think he was struggling a little bit to generate a ton of power at the point of attack. And part of that is the Bears were a bit more, right-handed in terms of the running game, at least in terms of the blocking direction. Sometimes, if you look at the running back rush direction, sometimes it's based on, even if he cuts back to the left, it'll go down as a left run, even though like the play was designed to the right. So sometimes those numbers can be a little bit fooling, but like a lot of the running plays, the zone runs, they're stepping to the right. And so when you're stepping to the right, a lot of times then Trapillo is trying to get a defensive tackle. And a lot of times it was Cam Hayward in this game. Sometimes it was Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon. And Trapillo did not do well in some of those running plays trying to get to Cameron Hayward. And I don't necessarily blame him or feel like, oh, wow, that's a big real concern there. I mean, a lot of the other running plays against Herbig, he was fine. I thought in particular, like he moved better in some of those zone runs versus trying to do the gap scheme downhill runs and just be more power one-on-one with those defensive linemen. He seemed to be a little bit undermanned from like a strength and power at the point of attack standpoint in the running game. And I think that's part of why Theo Benedett is in there and won that competition, is because they want his run blocking a little bit more and can live with the pass protection maybe being a little bit worse. So I think that'll be something to keep an eye on, especially if Benedett misses Friday's game against the Eagles as well and Trapillo's back out there. I mean, we're going to be watching every snap he does anyway, but that split between like how well he's run blocking and how well he's pass blocking will be something to monitor and see. I'm not going to, make a sweeping judgment on how he is as a young player from one first ever career start at left tackle, but I was definitely a lot more positively encouraged and feel like that's trending in the right direction for sure. Luke Newman filling in at right guard, another rookie in there for Jonah Jackson when he was hurt. I will say on the front end, very small sample size. It was 16 passing plays and 2 running plays at right guard. Did a couple other runs as a fullback, but not the same responsibility there. So I'm not going to make sweeping judgments there. I don't think he gave up any pressures, but he got beat a couple of times where then, either the center had to come over and help him or like a running back would pick up the guy that just beat Luke Newman, or he missed a responsibility here and there, but not any actual like true pressures to the quarterback. I think he got away with some stuff, but very, very small sample size. Also a rookie 6th-round pick. Expectations should be pretty low. But on defense, real quick before we wrap up here, the linebackers. I think I was most concerned with Ruben Hippolyte before he got hurt. He took a really big hit from, I think, Darnell Washington, the tight end, just gave him a lick, and that's when he left the game. So we'll see how his injury status looks moving forward. But he to me, is still, it's kind of like the preseason at times where a little lost, a little bit of a chicken with his head cut off. The instincts are still kind of catching up, and the game moves fast. And, you're thrown in at linebacker against the Steelers offense that ran a lot of pre-snap motion, had a bunch of tight ends and different formations in the game, and you're trying, and fullback back there, or tight ends kind of in the backfield, moving around. Like, I'm willing to be patient, and also with him in this game, also a very small sample size before the injury. It was, I just lost the number headed here, 13 plays. So, okay, 7 run plays where he looked a little lost, 5 plays in coverage where maybe he was running around, but, didn't give up anything major there. Had a nice stop in there at one point on a run play. Like, I'm not panicking, but wasn't particularly impressed with him. A lot more impressed with DeMarco Jackson and Eamon Ogbamamiga. Jackson, I think, was in a little bit over his head at first. I think he was wearing the green dot, so he's trying to call plays. And I think first quarter or so, he was trying to do a little bit too much and overrunning some plays but I think as the game went on, settled in quite a bit more, tackled really well. I think he missed 1 in this game, but had a number of those like check downs where he stepped up and made the tackle and, wasn't like breaking up passes, but just limiting a lot of the yards after catch and some of the damage there, and made some nice plays in the running game as well. And then when Eamon Ogbamamiga steps into a bigger role for Ruben Hippolyte, he too I thought was just really solid. I mean, he's not some like stellar player who belongs in the starting lineup, but just like for a backup thrown in there, got the job done. Like made a couple of big run stops, also tackled pretty well. I think he missed 1, but for the most part, like wrapping guys up. Again, like they're not making diving pass breakups or running with Jonnu Smith up the seam for big plays in coverage, but just like trying to limit some of the damage there. I think for a bunch of backups, they absolutely did more than enough there. And then one other guy I'll throw in this conversation quick. The edge rusher the Bears traded for, Joe Tryon Sharenka. I can never say his last name, the hyphenation of his last name. Like, still kind of waiting for more from him. I know you gave up a 6th-round pick, so we're not expecting anything, stellar out of this world, but just not giving you much as a pass rusher and playing more and more after the Dio Odengbo injury. Like he and Austin Booker are kind of rotating in that other spot, and Dominic Robinson gets hurt in this game. So then Joe Tryon Sharenka has to play even more. I thought he held up fine and setting the edge in the running game, but beyond that, not a lot to write home about. I'm still hopeful to get more from him as the season goes on. But in theory, the Bears should hopefully get healthier. I mean, it's a short week for Philadelphia, so I'm not expecting like a miracle cure where not going to be all three linebackers because Edmonds is on injured reserve, but like you'd like to get at least one of Sewell or Tremaine Edmonds back, Sewell or TJ Edwards back, ideally both, but at least one would be nice. You'd like to get at least one of Jalen Johnson or Kyler Gordon off of injured reserve, ideally both, but I think we're expecting Jalen Johnson at a minimum, and Stevenson's been in and out of the last 2 games with injury, so I'm maybe not counting on him playing again, but every little bit healthier they get should help the defense play even just a little bit better against an Eagles team that is very good, but just blew it in a major way against the Dallas Cowboys. So they're definitely a beatable team. Didn't score any points in the second half, held to 21 after just that first half. So we'll have a lot to break down from Bears-Eagles this week. We'll have crossover Thursday coming out Thanksgiving morning to preview Bears-Eagles coming up later on. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're looking for a second listen today, you can always check out Locked On NFL for more football talk, because it comes out twice a day, once in the morning with Tyler Rowland, and then again in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. And I co-host the Tuesday morning podcast with Tyler Rowland. We're talking about Shedeur Sanders starting for the Browns, Baker Mayfield with the Buccaneers, Joe Burrow coming back, J.J. McCarthy not playing well, and then we also talk about a pretty mediocre Monday Night Football game between the 49ers and the Panthers that felt more like a Thursday night football game. But more football talk there for your second listen. Just make sure you come on back, make Locked On Bears your first listen again tomorrow for another opportunity to bear down.